Hello and welcome to Graceful Connections presented by Academy for the Soul. I'm your host, Sophie Bidar, and co-creator of Graceful Connections together with Christel Hughes, founder of Academy for the Soul, the online school for intuitive arts. Graceful Connections is an adventure of exploration, discovery, healing, liberation, growth, and truthful expression, which is facilitated, amplified, magnified, and blessed really with grace. As graceful connections are woven between you and our expert speakers, your graceful guides into living your divine radiance. Thank you for being with us and bringing your unique vibration, colors, and energetic imprints, without which something would be missing. Thank you for answering yes to the calling of grace and for your willingness to fully and completely embrace, express, own, simply live your divine radiance. So let's begin. I invite you to relax and take a few deep breaths. And breathing out all that does not belong to this moment. Let's bring all your attention, your presence here and now. We set our intention that our time together, all that is shared in words and beyond the words, all the energies that we call in and flow serve our highest good, our evolution, and be of service to the highest good of all. I invite you to open your heart or open it even more and be ready to receive. And to open your mind or open it even more and be ready to receive. Activating your connection to the new earth crystalline grid and your connection to galactic center, the center of truth, so that you are held, both grounded and suspended. You are safe, relaxed, you're ready and open to receive. Now I'm calling the orb of grace from the heart of the universe and placing the orb of grace around our group, our gathering, and each and every one of us, that we be held in grace and infused with grace all along our time together. Let's take a moment to adjust to the purity and the subtle high frequency of grace, allowing it to gracefully dissolve, realign, harmonize, amplify, magnify all that needs to be so, in purest alignment with divine will and the divine order of grace. And breathe. Beautiful. Now, within the orb of grace, I'm delighted to welcome our expert speaker, the amazing, clairvoyant, medical intuitive Amanda Hopkins, who will be sharing about how to eliminate cellular damage, preventing body supra-consciousness. Amanda Hopkins is an international expert in identifying deficient energy flow in the body that impairs function and creates disease. She's known for her clairvoyant ability to penetrate deeply into the root cause and immediately identify the main elements causing illness. Amanda has a unique and powerful process of intuitively mapping points in your body systems that are collectively undermining vitality and depleting your body's energetic resources. With her keen intuitive mastery and wizard-like abilities, Amanda has supported hundreds of people with restoring energy flow so their body can repair itself and recover its high-level vitality. Ultimately, as a certified intuitive strategist, NLP, and Academy Master Teacher, she assists and provides you with the tools to create inner stability for lasting whole body wellness. Her purpose is to greatly empower you in your relationship with your body. It is such a blessing to have you with us today, Amanda. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here and welcome me into the space. I mean, this is so exciting. I can't wait to really dive into and bring forward that supracellular consciousness. What I see is these sacred light grids that illuminate the body, and when animated, have the potential to bring forth such majesty within our body being. And so, of course, we're going to be looking at what does that look like? How do I see that laid out? And what is that potential that we can awaken for you through your body? And why that's important, why that's important to really allow us to gain access to more expansive realms of light, the celestial realms, the galactic realms, as we're connecting into the galactic center, as you so lovingly took us into, Sophie. And really recognizing, of course, with me, that we're going to talk about really illuminating the light in the body, but we also have to recognize what's preventing that, and I'm going to be taking you deep. We are really getting into the deep trenches. I feel like every time I come in here with you, Sophie, we go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. Well, now we're really getting into the trenches of these deep trauma tracks that get held in the muscles and the fascia in the body. And they have parallel energies running through the brain and the nervous system. And they really run the show behind the scenes, right? They run the show, and we don't even realize sometimes that they're working and running our bodies and running our lives. And so we've got to get to this understanding of what are these trauma tracks? How are they impacting the body? And what do we do? How do we shift those so that we can become these animated bodies of light in the way that you're organically designed to? So, Sophie, you're running in the way that you're organically designed to. I'm running in the way that I'm meant to. All of you're each of you running in the way that you're designed to, not all the contortions and distortions that you've made to compensate for what other people have expected of you or what you thought you had to expect of yourself, but really running from that foundation of light in the body that enables you to access those more expansive realms. So as you can tell, I'm passionate about this animation of that super consciousness within the body so that we can really be living in these transcendent states of consciousness that want to awaken within us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And we know that you are such a genius at revealing to us the inherent intelligence of the body, and not only the intelligence of it, but also the path to its illumination and what does that do for us. So we know it's going to be fascinating. And already we want to make note that on Friday, March the 15th, we'll gather again with Amanda for live intuitive readings galore. For now, let's embark, yes, on a deep exploration. As you said, Amanda, we're going deep today, even deeper. Exploration of the body as a roadmap, indicating where you've been and what you've journeyed through, and revealing cues and clues that enable radiant cellular awakening of greater soul potential within. We certainly want that. So, to begin with, Amanda, let's have a look at the trauma tracks. I know that this is something that you are looking into at the moment, and we're on the edge of our seats with these trauma tracks. What are they? What are trauma tracks? And tell us what are we talking about here?
Right. So, we all know that trauma impacts the body. This is no mystery. We've known about this for a long time. And we know that emotions get stored up in the body. And we know that we become responsive to that trauma, that we can act in fear states. We can act out of anxiety states that we hold in the body that lock our nervous system into that fight, flight, freeze chronically to some degree. Right. None of that is anything new. We've covered this, many people know about this. And there's a lot of support to attempt to shift the dynamics within the body. Now, what I found is that so often when approaches are taken to shifting trauma, there's an emphasis or a focus on a certain event or a certain type of event, or maybe even a series of events, so if there's like a consistent abuse or something like that, something that's ongoing, or something where we've had multiple physical injuries that have occurred, there are a lot of approaches to address those specific types of trauma that we hold in the body. And some of that can be very effective to bring some relief to the body, right? But what I have found is that with every single event, every single occurrence, every single ordeal we have that is shocking or emotionally charged, right? It doesn't even have to be a full-on shock, but it can be an emotionally charged event that impacts our nervous system and impacts our cellular consciousness. I know you know about this, Sophie, because emotional charged events really they create a deep impression. And what I started to see these as are trauma points. So it's a trauma point. It's like an anchor in the body. It goes really deep into the body. It creates this deep impression, right? So if you have an event, this trauma point takes root in the body. And, one event might have more than one places in the body where there's a point, right? There might be multiple points created in the body depending on what that trauma is. So if it's a physical injury, for example, and you hurt a shoulder and a hip, you might have multiple points in those spaces of the body, right? That are sinking in. And now you have that anchor point, you have that memory that's created in the cellular consciousness in those spaces. So we start to, as we have different traumas and we carry over these trauma points from other lifetimes, right? We even have projections. We can have those traumas projected from those generational timelines, right? So if our parents, for example, have experienced a trauma and their fear or their anxiety is strong enough, that can create a deep trauma point that is projected into our fields and impacting our body in certain spaces and planes, right? So what I found is that we've got these trauma points, but what happens is there's two different ways that the tracks start to form. One can be that these trauma points start to stack upon each other. So they stack, they get deeper, and they're in close proximity. So they start to stack and they start to create a deeper groove. They start to come together and connect. The other way is if they're just tracking along each other, right? So they're either stacking and getting deeper, and then they don't have anywhere else to go deep in, and then they start to spread out, or they stack along next to each other, right? So the storage in the body really depends on how you are programmed or wired to store that, right? So we all have our personas that are really serving to protect or control, or ensure our survival needs, right? And these personas store this trauma in a way that they feel it, that aspect of us feels like it's serving us. And so it creates these tracks, it creates these memories, it creates these grooves to hold that in place. So now you're coming from that place of constriction, you're ready. You're ready for the next thing that's going to happen, right? You're ready for that next trauma. You've got the memory in there. You know how to respond to that. But always being at the ready, we know that's exhausting to the body. And that's not how we're actually meant to run energy through our body. So it actually weakens the body. It doesn't create the state of strength that we think it is when it's put into place. So when you start to have these trauma tracks running through the body, what happens is when those elevated light energies come in, they hit those tracks and they stop dead and they fizzle out completely, or they might scatter. So, especially in the mind, when I see the light consciousness coming into the mind, what happens is when it hits those tracks, it scatters oftentimes. So it creates states of confusion. It creates that scattered, like feeling like I'm all over the place, or I don't know which direction to go, which leads to indecision. Or it also creates this sense of not trusting, right? It's like you don't have that clear signal. It feels like, oh, I got an impression, but it's just a little piece, like, I'm not sure. Was that something? right? It's just such a small little dink instead of it's like meant to be a flow, and you're getting a dink because it's hitting up against these hardened tracks of energy that are based in those lower level energies of fear or anxiety or worry or whatever other programming is held in the consciousness of the mind that translates to the body. So Sophie, I know you mentioned the intuitive mapping. I know I've talked about this before. So when I'm doing the intuitive mapping, what I'm doing is when I'm looking into the body, you know, someone says, oh, you know, my hips are tight. I go in and I look at the hips and I'm like, okay, what's going on in the hips? And then I'm like, oh, well, here are these muscles, or here's the energy in the spine. I'm really looking at where in the body is it all interconnected, because it's these tracks of trauma that are connecting all throughout the body to that one symptom that might be showing up. Well, then what I always do, anyone who's worked with me knows this, then I go and look, okay, where is this showing up in the brain and the spine? Where is this showing up in the nervous system? Where is this showing up in the wiring that can also even extend out into the aura? So that body mapping really is looking and tracing these tracks of trauma. And so often they're held in the fascia. You know, there's a lot of energy that gets held in the fascia, especially in the back. It's tightness, constriction. It tightens up the body, locks your body into fixed states of being. This is really important. We're going to talk a little bit more about these fixed states of being. But when we have these trauma tracks, you really become in more of a static state of being. You're not fluid, you're not mobile, you're not able to adapt in the moment as easily and effectively. And so when those elevated energies of light, when those elevated frequencies, when that super consciousness seeks to awaken within, it can almost even feel like an assault to the body. Right? It can feel painful. It can actually hurt. You know, and I want you, you know, with the trauma points, there's a lot of different ways that you can recognize. And one of the ways you can recognize is really just, you know, breathe into your body and notice, where is my breath not really fully moving in, right? Those are tight points where you can start to recognize, okay, you know, what's the trauma that I'm holding here? You can start to ask questions and dig a little deeper. Another thing you might notice is that when you touch the body, like you might touch certain spots on the body, you can even run up, you know, the back of your arm, for example. There's a lot of sensitive tissue that can be in place. If you feel pain or sensitivity as you press in, you know, you don't have to like really hard press in, but be a little firm and press in there. You can feel points. Or even on the outside of your thighs is another place where oftentimes you can find points of sensitivity. You know, we're going to talk a little bit more about the psoas and in the hips and things like that. That's a little bit harder to dig down into. So I'm trying to give you some easy starting points here, you know. Armpits are another good spot, right? There can be sensitive areas in there that when you touch them, these are trauma points where everything's tightened up, that fascia's gotten tight. And so this can start to give you clues as to where are those trauma points in the body for me. Okay, so is this all making sense, Sophie?
Yes, it does. So to wrap up so far, the way the trauma points, their purpose is they settle in the body as a way of preserving us from future trauma, right? That's their intention, if I understand well, that they want to be there as a signal and to support us in case more of the same is coming or something similar, that we have a response to handle whatever is coming. And in being present in our body in those different areas, especially that you have mentioned, what they end up doing is absorbing. I'm seeing like absorbing paper that absorbs, right? It absorbs the light that flows through the body, that flows in with a whole different purpose to guide us, to support us, to nourish us, to do all sorts of things. But it's like I'm seeing like the light gets swallowed by these trauma points, right? Is that correct so
Yes.
far?
Yes. So part of the purpose too is also to soften the blow of the emotion, right? So it feels intense. It feels like too much for the body to handle. So these points become dense. They become unmoving, so that emotion becomes static. So it's just concentrated in one spot and it's not moving through the body. Now it's like, okay, it's right there. It's compartmentalized there. It's staying there. So now you've got it dampened. And you also have that memory. That's the perception. That's the perception of how they serve us, right? And you know, that like you said, it swallows up the light. That's it. That's such a beautiful imagery, right? It does. It sucks in the light and it just
Mhm.
dampens it. Like it brings that light vibration into the vibration of the density. So it's like attuning it to that fixed, dense energy instead of allowing the light. Now, sometimes that light can kind of chip away at the outer edges a little bit, right? But I want to give you an example here of what it's like. So let's say you had a tree in your yard that
Mhm.
was rotting on the inside, and you know, we want to keep the trees growing if we can, but there are some cases where we have to take a tree down because it might fall on a house, or you know, might not even be good for the tree to keep it growing when it's rotting on the inside. Now, if you go out with a pocket knife and start chipping at the bark, it's not going to have much of an impact. And it's going to be dangerous because if you do actually start to get in there, you're not really going to have much control over where it's going to fall with such a
Mhm.
little chipping away. So it's going to be an arduous, long process. And I don't even know, maybe you may not even get that done before the tree rots in the inside, right? This is a similar idea when we approach bringing light into the body from the outside in, which is a very common practice. It's powerful, don't get me wrong. It can be a major benefit, and we want to do that. But we want to recognize that we also need to bring light through the body from the inside out, right? Which is that's what I love to do that. I love to go in the body and bring it from the inside out so we can actually identify these trauma tracks. We want to shift the frequency of those. We want to pop out those trauma points in a way that, you know, we want to be very careful as we're doing that. We want to actually pop them out and get them out of the space and bring the light in from the outside and then, right? So we want to have those spaces illuminated as sacred light points rather than these density points in the body. And so we want to have this two-pronged approach. Now, why this is important and what I have found happens with these trauma tracks is that, you know, as they are built in, I talked about how they start to feel normal. They say, you know, that starts to feel like our baseline. When we've got these trauma tracks, we have a certain baseline for this is how I feel. This is how I carry myself. This is my posture. They impact your posture, right? This is how I hold my body. This is how I carry myself. When we have these tracks in place, what happens is that we start to get comfortable. We start to get comfortable. Like, this is where I feel certain. This is my baseline. This is where I feel comfortable. This is what feels certain for me. This is where I feel like I know what my strength levels are. I know what I'm dealing with. And so we start to kind of cover over those tracks. It's like if you go on a trail through the woods, you know, and there's a trail that's been carved out, and somebody, you know, people don't use it for a while and it starts to grow over. You might get all these beautiful greens and flowers, right? But that trail's still there underneath, right? And so who knows, if the trail has a pothole, you could step in the pothole and hurt your leg or something, right? As you're walking along that trail. So we have to recognize what's underneath the beauty. We bring in that beautiful light. We want to recognize, what are we bringing that into, right? Just like the overgrowth on the trail, what are we bringing that onto? Is it a nice flat surface where we can walk through, enjoy the beauty and the trail? Or are there potholes and things that are going to jar our system, you know, as we start to bring that in, are going to have a detrimental impact? So we, you know, those tracks get hidden, they get covered as we start to bring in light and bring in energies. And even, you know, I don't know if you've ever done this, Sophie, I've done it before, but sometimes we convince ourselves like, I'm good, you know, I overcame that. And then something comes up and we're like, oh no, I didn't get it all.
Yeah,
Emotion,
I
right?
get it. No, I didn't get it at all. Yeah.
um so, you know, and that's okay, right? It is a journey. You know, there's some level of we've got to work at the level of our body feeling safe to let go. And so we've got to understand the inner workings of the body, and how do we foster that sense of feeling safe, feeling certain that we perceive those tracks have been doing for us, so that then when we create that sense of certainty internally, we can actually bring the light in, and we know that that's serving us and actually strengthening us. And we don't have to hold on to these old structures and these old traps and these old points that we have in place anymore. But we have to create that sense of certainty internally before we will really fully release that and not try to recreate it in some other kind of distorted way. right? If we let those go, if we do the clearings and we release those trauma tracks and we release those trauma points and we release the associated programming with that, but we haven't fostered that sense of safety and certainty in the body in specific ways, then our body's going to be going, oh no, I don't feel safe. I don't feel secure. I don't feel certain. What can I do? And it's going to try to create some sort of way to feel safe and feel certain. And a lot of times that can look like trying to control things outside of self, right? Control our environment, control other people.
Yeah.
And it's out of an internal need to feel that sense of certainty. So it is valid. It's a valid need. We need to feel that sense of internal certainty within our being, right? But we want to deliberately create that in our body. And so when we have these trauma tracks, it creates a sort of a false sense of certainty because it's founded in order to sort of avoid those fear situations, those anxiety-driven situations, those things that we're worried about, rather than being centered in the light of our strength and knowing, you know, whatever comes at me, I've got this. I've got my intuition. I've got source. I've got my energy. I've got my foundation of light that I'm going to springboard from.
Right. It's more a delusional certainty made of denial and avoidance rather than an empowered certainty, right?
Yeah. And so we want to be living in that empowered certainty in the body, right? That's what allows us to stand strong. To, you know, there's strength, but there's light. There's strength and freedom. There's you know, that it's not a fixed, it's a moving, fluid state of being, but it's so certain and strong and founded in your light and truth that nothing shakes that foundation, right? Nothing comes in and disturbs that. Like, you have a strong sense of self and who am I here to be and what am I here to be about? And that's not even a fixed position, right? There is, in essence, from in these bodies, you know, the idea of full awakening, full illumination, that's ever expanding. So it's not like we're reaching a certain target and that's it. And then we're going to be fixed in that light flow forever. We are actually this beautiful organic, you know, when I see what the brain looks like when it's lit up in its natural state of being, because I'm always shown, you know, when I'm working with a client, I'm always shown what the full potential is and what that ideal flow looks like. And it's gorgeous, you know, it's beautiful light grids with swirling and spiraling energies, light energies coming in. And there's an adaptivity, there's a capacity to flow and flex and move so that as more expansive and higher vibrational energies come in, your body's naturally adapting and reorganizing to receive that, right? Knowing that that is a beneficial light. And so that's what we're really looking at creating as that foundation through the whole body, through the entire body. So our bodies can receive, our hips can receive, our legs are, you know, our whole body is moving in coherence with that greater expression. That's what draws us forward. That's what naturally allows us to move forward organically in our actions, rather than having to use willpower or going, okay, I got to do this. I'm gonna, you know, bear in, hunker down, and I'm gonna get into it. You know, we actually can be drawn forward into action more effectively. Now, that's not to say we're not gonna have times where it's like, I feel like doing that, you know, and then we might have to go, okay, let me kick back into my center, right? But we know we can bring ourselves back into center if we have that moment of like, you know, I'm being pulled out. So, you know, the significance of being able to be strong and centered in that light of truth, though, is that we do have to recognize that we have these trauma tracks, we have these trauma points within us that we do need to address. So, you know, I always like that idea of we have our vision, we bring that in, and then we recognize what's stopping us from getting there. We address that in the moment, and we keep moving forward in action. Right? We're taking the action, something comes up, we bump up against something, we look at it, we keep going, you know, rather than sitting in and doing a ton of, we could do energy clearing 24/7. That would be exhausting. We do need to sleep, but we want to be taking action, noticing what's going on in our body, doing the shift and keep going, right? We want to make this an organic process. And part of that is having that supracellular consciousness available so that we can sense and recognize, ooh, this energy I'm noticing in my body is not a match for what I'm stepping into. What do I need to dig into? What do I need to dive into?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I have a bigger question where we're going to go, but before we go there, let me keep this one. Um, Before we go there, I want to comment on the how the back to the hijacking of the light that the trauma tracks do, right, when they swallow the light. Um, I can perceive how, well, in addition to hijacking the light, what it adds to it. And I want to share about this because I feel that many in the audience may be experiencing this. There can be so much frustration, maybe even despair in doing so much effort, being so dedicated to bringing the light, right? For, as you said, from the out in, or cultivating the light from within. And yet, with these trauma tracks in place, hijacking the light, we may get little to no result or experience of it. And it may be very frustrating. It may be even lead to despair because doing so much and getting nothing, or feeling we get nothing out of it. Um, I feel that this may be an experience that many are having, and it might drive you crazy, like not understanding, but I'm doing so much. I'm so dedicated to the light, and here I am just getting nothing out of it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I had a perfect example. I was working with a client yesterday and we're in session and, she was like, oh, I've done these clearings. She gave me these readings. She was part of one of my longer programs and I had done some readings for her. And, I always encourage and give the tools to do the shifts for yourself. I think it's really important that we empower ourselves to be able to do the shifts. So, she'd come to me and she's like, oh, I did the clearings, but she was in frustration. She's like, I don't know. Did I get it all? I have no idea. And so as I was looking in, what was really blocking her from trusting, and she did an excellent job of making the shifts, but she couldn't perceive it. Just what you were saying. She made the shifts, but she wasn't perceiving the fullness of the light. And when we went in, what I found was that she had running along the spine, like I think it was it was 12 tracks that were fused together. So they were like like a board running down the back of the spine. And then there were the trauma points and they were all different places. It wasn't like uniform up along these tracks, locking it in, but there were the trauma points that were actually what were plugging into the body. So the tracks were behind the spine. They weren't plugging into the spine, but they were running behind. And then the trauma points were plugging into her back. And she had all this tension in her shoulders, her upper back. She had all this tension in her abdomen. She couldn't breathe deeply down into her abdomen. And what we found was that those tracks were also holding a cord in place in her back power center. So she had cleared out to the timeline, but that space between the tracks and the body, she had this like plug of a cord that was sitting back there that hadn't released because the tracks were blocking it from fully releasing out. We also found that those tracks were plugging into the back head and then coming up over and reaching into different spots of the brain tied to the brain wiring that related to the patterns that were tied up in those trauma tracks. And so these were from different lifetimes, some from this lifetime, like there was a whole meshing of them together. But, because she had done so much of the clearing work, and with, bringing light in through the body, we were able to really pinpoint what's going on in the body that just allowed us to just easily extract that and release it out. And then the cord came out in the back and she was like, I can breathe. Like her whole physical body, she had all this tightness and tension in her belly, all of it released.
Wow.
Because we got to the specifics of what was tied into these tracks and what was going on with it. And then seeing the other elements that then created in the body, like that cord and then the tightness in the front belly, all of that released when we identified those deeper tracks. But we also really did have to recognize where was that wiring in the mind as well that was feeding the creation of those tracks. So, I mean, that wasn't even fully plugged into her body and it was having that physical impact to that level. So, you know, a lot of times I see them actually running in and through the body. So
Right.
to your point, Sophie, it's so important that we identify how they are constructed and, you know, plugged in, glued in, wrapped in the body, so that then as we release that, then we can actually feel the shift in the body. We can actually
Mm.
open up. You know, this isn't an isolated incident. I remember one time working with a client who had a frozen shoulder for 20 years. And we went into session and we found she had trauma tracks that were running from the shoulder down and plugging into her back hip. And it was all about feeling like she had to stay in control. She had to maintain control. She couldn't get out of control, or she would get into trouble, or things wouldn't go the way she wanted to. We released that paradigm in the tracks. It was like a circular kind of track running down through there. Frozen shoulder completely released. And she wrote back weeks later and was like, I can't believe it. It's still open, like it's still good, you know, because that can happen, right? We can do the shifts and we can have some instant relief in the body, but then it can come back. And that's
Right.
the significance of the trauma tracks. Those are
Right.
those grooves that we've got to get to, because that's what's going to bring that back in if we don't shift those out and we don't release those out.
So that may be an indication, or let's make it a question. Would it be an indication when we do some healing or receive some healing or treatment, right? And we get an improvement, and then it comes back. Would you say that it's a good indication that there would be trauma tracks that are
Yeah,
just
I mean, we just want to
messing
go
around
deeper.
there?
We want to go deeper. When that's the case,
Right.
we're
Yeah.
doing things and not
Right.
getting the results. We want to go deeper. And it's not that, you know, I get this all the time. People are like, I worked on that. I worked on that. And I'm like, yes. And you've dug in. You've
Right.
made
Right.
strides. So, you know, we want to recognize that you can be making strides, and we're going to take it deeper. We're going to actually go way deep into that whole track. And it's not just about extracting it. You know, when we talk about coming from inside the body and coming from outside, when we can bring the light and activate the light through the body, we can actually start to dissolve those plugs. We can start to dissolve those tracks. And then when we bring the celestial light energies through the auric field and we really expand out and bring that energy in, we're coming from both sides now and we're dissolving. And we're bringing those light energies together. You know, we all have our own celestial note, if you will, our own celestial song, right? We know that, you know, I know Christel Hughes was talking about the devas and the note, the Davic note, right? That we can connect with, right? So we all have our celestial song. And so when we bring those frequencies together through the body, you know, we have, I know, Sophie, I've talked to you so many times about the sacred portals and sacred spaces of the body. I know we did a really beautiful conversation before about the lungs and how the lungs bring this cosmic light energy through our body and breathe divine light through our being. Right. And so, you know, that's just one example. We've got tons of these spaces in the body. In fact, I feel like every cell can be a sacred conduit for us. And that's why we want to animate the supracellular consciousness. But, you know, as we bring that light through the body, and then we also bring the light energy through those celestial realms, the light is coming together. And when it comes together on either side of those tracks, all of a sudden those tracks, the energy required to hold them in place cannot stabilize, it cannot sustain itself. And so they dissolve and they become attuned to these greater frequencies of self, right? So we have to recognize what are the frequencies that are wanting to awaken and come through us. And then also, what do we attach to? You know, what do we attach to in the mind? What do we attach to that we think we need, that when we let go of that attachment, that's going to allow us to bring those light energies together in the body? So we really have to look at the parallels of how the mind and the current programming in our cellular consciousness we have running, how is that impacting the body and holding those trauma tracks in place. And then when we bring that light in, then we can allow the consciousness, the higher truth, the new perspectives that are created in those light frequencies to dissolve those tracks completely. And it can be fun. You know, it doesn't have to be a painful process of dredging up all the emotions that are held.
Mhm.
You've lived with these emotions. You've lived with this for however
Right.
long, lifetimes, right? So we don't have to dredge all that back up.
Mm.
But we do have to be able to recognize and pinpoint, where are they? What's holding them in place, and make a choice. Let's dissolve it, right? And that's the beauty of, I know, Sophie, you created our space of grace here to be held, so
Mhm.
that we can be open to this information. But also,
Yeah.
that's the beauty of having the space to be held in the dissolution of the trauma track, so that we can bring those elevated light grids online, not just in the brain. I was talking about the brain with the light grid and the energies that spiral in, but also through the whole body. Our whole body can hold that light grid, every single space of our body. Every organ, every gland, I see them as having their own sacred, unique grid that facilitates their function and their role, not just from a physical standpoint, but also from that sacred. What is the sacredness that they bring to the body? What is the sacred consciousness that they bring to the body? What is the illuminated divinity that they can awaken within us? Right. And so we can look at the individual light grids, we can look at the overall body light grid, right? We can really start to play with this light and bring that in. And so we can make this a fun journey of discovery, rather than this feeling of, oh no, now I got to go find all my trauma points. I got to find these trauma tracks, and I'm gonna roll up my sleeves and let's get to work. We can do that. And we want to do that, but we also want to recognize that we are bridging together that capacity to bring the light in, to effectively dissolve those, so that we don't have to be so in the analytical space of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. One one question before I get to my big question that I believe you've touched upon it, but we want to be very clear about that. But before even going there, I have another one question. So you've mentioned in terms of the body, locations in the body, you've mentioned the arms, the armpits, the lungs. Are there, but then for your clients, you mentioned one on her spine or the abdomen. Are there certain areas of the body that you observe working with clients that are more impacted by those trauma tracks, or is it very specific to each individual, or are there some kind of commonalities? How does that work?
Yeah, there's both.
There
Right,
both.
there's both. Right. So, the way that we create those trauma tracks within our body, because we do create them, usually there's, with an intention, there's a desired outcome for them being created. And oftentimes it doesn't work as we intended. We know that. We know in life we'll have good intentions and embark on something and we'll go, oh, that didn't turn out quite how I expected, right?
Right.
That's okay. That's fine, right? We
Mm.
adapt. We look at, okay, that didn't work. Let me try something new, right? So the way that we create these trauma tracks, we all do it in our own way, but there are spaces in the body where we tend to hold those most. And I've seen them come up over and over, time and time again, and almost always consistently. These are spaces that I see light up. And so I really want to talk about the psoas and the iliacus. Often it's referred as to the iliopsoas because it's a compound muscle that's all connected, and it's in our lower body. Going from the 12th thoracic spine, down through the lumbar spine, connecting out to the hips, and then running in the hips. Right, the iliopsoas really controls our hip flexion, has an impact on our lower back. It's deep. It's not easy. I was talking about, it's not as easy to access as just, the tender points on our arms. It's deeper in the hip joint, especially the iliacus. Okay. Now, the psoas is commonly referred to, I don't know if you've ever heard it referred to, as the muscle of the soul. And there's a reason for this. The reason that it is referred to as the muscle for the soul is because it plays such a foundational role in our capacity to move, right? It is the muscle that connects our spine to our lower body, right? That whole iliopsoas. So it is responsible for our movement and our capacity to have that foundation and strength, and to be able to support and hold the light that wants to come through, to support and hold our body up, to breathe deeply. There's a connection between the iliopsoas and the diaphragm that allows us and enables us to breathe deeply into the body. And we know the power of breath, right? We know the power of breath to allow us to come to center, to feel the strength of our body, to feel the strength of our truth animating within us. If all we did was stop and bring our attention to the breath and clear out all other thoughts and all other energies, it is powerful. It creates that space of openness that allows the insight, that allows the intuition to come through. And the psoas plays a big role in allowing that breath to come deep down into the body. And so that's one area where, I mean, it is known by trauma experts, right? That is an area of the body where we hold and store trauma. That's very commonly known. And so there are physical things we can do. So, you know, Sophie, you talked about if we're doing things and we're not getting the results, what, you know, is that an indication that we have trauma tracks? It can be. And, you know, we can actually do physical things with the body that can create an emotional release, right? We can work with those muscles. There are ways that we can open up the psoas and the iliacus and, you know, really open up that space and open up the hips. There's even, I mean, if you look up somatic exercises, there are exercise programs dedicated to releasing trauma from the body. Okay. So there's lots of resources out there for that at the physical level. So that's really good. I'm a huge proponent. We always want to pair the physical release with what we're doing energetically. And again, you know, we want to really recognize what are the trauma tracks that we are holding in the iliopsoas, in that vital muscle that allows us to have our flexion, our flexibility, our capacity to move, our capacity to react and respond quickly in our bodies, right? We want to recognize what are, you know, the stiffness that wouldn't allow us to have that deep breath in. What are the energetics behind? So that's one area where we really want to go deeper. We really want to go deeper and recognize and understand the significance of this muscle of the soul that enables us to expand and grow and flex with the bigger energies that are coming in to open us up to be more, and recognize that that holds the capacity to allow us to do that. We all have this beautiful, brilliant compound muscle in our body that is supporting us in that endeavor, right? So, you know, sometimes we can feel alone and not supported. That is often held in that lower back. Right. And that's the psoas runs in that lower back. So, you know, as we start to really work with that muscle, that allows us to recognize, wait a minute, I've got this brilliant, beautiful muscle in here that's here just to support me. That's its sole function and role and its sole purpose. Right. And so we start to recognize our body as a reflection of that deeper divine connection, that reflection of the support that is available for us, that enables us to relax and breathe the light more deeply in. So that's one area, really powerful. That's probably the most impactful one that, you know, I really think is important to highlight in relation to holding trauma in the body and the trauma tracks that impact that. Because even if the trauma track is not held in the psoas, what can happen is when we have a trauma track that creates stress in the body, did you see what I just did? The stress, I crunched in. Crunched in. Those muscles are crunching in, putting me in a protective defensive mode, right? So that's what the stress in the body does. It contracts that muscle in. So when we can breathe in and be in that relaxed state, then we know that muscle is going to respond and guide us when we need it, but we can otherwise be in that relaxed state. When we are in that chronic fight, flight, freeze, we don't realize that we're holding that state. It feels like normal to be in a heightened state of nervous system overreactivity when it becomes chronic. And so when we start to bring attention to the psoas, we can recognize, oh no, you know, where have I been holding that state and not realizing it? And shift that, right? You get to make a choice then, because so often those are conditioned in and we don't have a conscious choice in the moment of creation because we didn't realize what was going on. But now we can bring that consciousness to that space and help shift that and make a new choice going forward. So that's one area where it's really important to focus and to open up. You know, in conjunction with that, the vagus nerve is another area where, you know, if it's overstimulated, we're going to be in that kind of chronic, like, oh my goodness, and I'm ready to go. We're not going to be breathing so deeply. So the vagus nerve has a connection to the psoas in a sense, in that it has a relationship with your diaphragm and your diaphragm has a relationship with the psoas. So there's all that interconnection all the way up, right? All the way up through the body. Now, the fascia of course, we have to mention the fascia, right? Our connective web of tissues that hold our body together, that, encase every single organ, gland, tissue, muscle, that when stressed, our fascia tightens up and constricts, right? Similar, the psoas does this, the fascia compresses in, tightens us in, right? And so we want to recognize, where are those trauma tracks embedded in the fascia, right? We want to go deeper into recognizing that as well. So these are areas where I always look. I always look at the psoas and iliacus. I always look at the fascia, and I always look at the nervous system and the brain, right? So really important areas of the brain are parts like the hippocampus and the amygdala, which are highly responsible for processing emotions and retaining memories, right? So we talked about the memory, the cellular memory. Well, our mind holds those memories and reflects that in the cells of our body. So we've got to look at these areas of the brain. All of this interrelationship between these areas are important to recognize, that they come together to hold the trauma tracks in place. And so we want to look at these specific areas when we are identifying the trauma tracks, because the trauma track isn't in just one area, but these are all common areas that are feeding the creation of that.
Right. Okay. Feeding the creation of that. Right. Yeah. Wow.
And holding them in place. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that clarity. The muscle of the soul, that's so beautiful to me. And I keep thinking, because I never heard of that name for it. And I'm thinking we certainly want to use this muscle for our soul, not for holding trauma. So I love that it's named in that way. And I love that you bring this clarity to it. It's kind of eye-opening to what have I been doing with my body? What have I been carrying?
Right.
Right?
Everybody's sitting a little straighter, right? Breathing a little
Right. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for this clarity. So now the big question, and on this we are again at the edge of our seats, because you have, and you may have touched on it when you talked about the grids of light, but you mentioned the supracellular consciousness, and now we really want to know all about this and why it is important for us to access. So what do you have to reveal about this?
Absolutely. This is the good part, right? So, we come habituated to certain postures, the way that we hold our body, how we sit.
Mhm.
If we're on a laptop, or working on a computer a lot, we've got that roundedness, just to give an example. And with these habituated states of being, again, we get locked into static states, right? Non-moving. It's like, this is the consistency with which I move, with how I hold my body, with how I run light or don't run light through my body, however that case might be working out specifically for you. Right. So we get into these habits, and we are habitual creatures, right? So we want to have our habits. We just want to be really consciously aware of what are the habits that we are creating and implementing and keeping with, because what we do consistently is going to have the greatest level impact than any one-time thing that we do. What we do consistently is the most important. Right.
Mm.
So that's really important foundation for this conversation about supracellular consciousness. So supracellular consciousness really is the pure consciousness of the soul, right? It is your unadulterated, unfiltered, undistorted purity of you. And when we have trauma traps in the mind and in the body, that pure consciousness, when it comes in, as soon as it comes up against that, it is distorted. It is no longer pure. It is no longer those pure frequencies of your soul self. So if it can't get past the mind, and if it can't get past the fascia and into the body, right, then you're not receiving that pure, elevated supra, right? That's what the supra is, the elevated soul consciousness of you. You're not receiving that in your cells. So what do? We want to go direct to cell. This is where we want to actually get into the cells and really bring that light of truth through the cells directly and bring that from the inside out. That's where we go into the body and we do the internal cleaning. That's where we recognize what is being held in those cells. that we're wanting to open and awaken, right? So we start to shift the consciousness of the cells to that elevated state of consciousness, right? When we come into the sacred container of light, we can actually step outside of the body in a way that we can observe it and go, okay, here's where those hardened energies are that aren't allowing for that supracellular consciousness to awaken. And here's what it feels like to really be in that state of the supra-consciousness, right? We can step into that. We can feel that. We can allow that to move and breathe into our body. And then we can bring that consciousness into the body from the inside out, right? I've done this. I oftentimes do this when we open a summit, right? I take you into what is the experience of the cosmic self or the divine self, or, really taking you into that experience of that so that your body knows what it's moving to, what it's attuning to, what it's wanting to, how it's wanting to vibrate, right? How each cell's wanting to vibrate to really be in that state of expansive consciousness in that moment. So with the supracellular consciousness, again, we've got the light grids. We can animate the light grids through different areas of the body. We can go into the psoas. So I want to come back to what we talked about, Sophie, when I was saying we have to create that sense of certainty in the body in order to feel safe, to really let go of the old trauma tracks and the trauma points that we've been holding on to. We want to animate that light grid in the psoas, the iliopsoas, that creates that foundation in the whole pelvis, the hips, that lower body. So we feel strong in our lower body, right? That is of that supra-consciousness. And so we can actually really open up to and awaken that within, right? We can go into the body. We can allow the consciousness of the cells to shift into that vibration of truth. And as we do that, that creates that sense of strength and certainty that allows anything that doesn't match that to dissolve. So any of the connection points. Often what I see is people clear, like, they may go ahead and even clear the tracks, but they don't clear the plugs. And so what happens? The tracks get recreated, right? That's such an important piece. And so when we bring that supracellular consciousness, when we bring that elevated, expansive consciousness to the body being, you have mastery in ways you wouldn't believe. Every single one of us holds different sorts of mastery, right? I recently worked with a client who had this beautiful capacity to bring light through her stomach, through her core star, and bring that out as a way to help people burn up energies that aren't serving them. And she's like, how do I awaken that? But she had a belief of being disempowered, right? It was so discordant with her supracellular consciousness. Her supracellular consciousness is, I'm this magnificent light being who's like beaming sunlight out of my body, and, using that to evoke joy and to help burn up anything that doesn't match that joy expression for whoever wants to receive it, and herself included, right? And so the power of awakening that supracellular consciousness is she now has this light source in her body that she can use to awaken that consciousness wherever she feels like there might be a restriction or constriction, right? She can bring that light of truth through her core to those spaces of the body and open that up for more of that mobility and freedom in the moment that she recognizes, wait, there's restriction here. Let me just bring that light to it. That then brings her the awarenesses that she needs to consciously understand or know to let go if that's what she needs. So it's really beautiful. This is the power of awakening our pure consciousness in our body, and then using that as a light source to serve our body.
Yes, and before I ask you how do we do that, I want to comment on how it's so precious. It's such a blessing to have you, Amanda, as our graceful guide, because with your clairvoyant ability, you perceive the reality, right, that we don't perceive, and you perceive where we are, where we stand, and so you can meet us there and bring us there where is our truth. And that's really, I feel it's a game changer, because it's what makes it possible, right? Because you have the full vision, right? If you didn't have the vision, well, we could just, like when we go in the dark and we look, okay, touch here, touch there, and step by step, right?
Trying to
Very
find your favorite
difficult.
shirt in a dark room.
Right, exactly, right. But with your, it's like you have these nighttime vision goggles or something. But this is your clairvoyant ability that allows you to see what needs to be seen, to see the full picture, and to see where there's a mismatch and how to correct the mismatch. So that's what makes it possible. That's what
Right.
makes
And
it.
I think what's important about that, Sophie, is even as a kid, like I've always had a pragmatic approach to things, right? This takes the emotionality and the attachment out of it because because it's, I hold such a strong stance that it's here's where you are, here's what needs to shift, let's just do it, that I've
Right.
even had people try to fight for their limitations. And I tell them, I'm like, "Oh, if you want to hold on to your limitation, you can." They're like, and then all of a sudden they're like, no, 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 I don't, like it's that quick of a
Yes.
switch that can
Yes.
flip when that state of being is held strong, when that state of vision is held strong for you, right? It can just be that quick that it's all of a sudden it's a choice, and whew, just
It is
like
a choice.
tons
Right.
of chunks of energy I've seen fall away at times, right? But we do have to have somebody who's willing to stand strong in that for us. And because of the clairvoyance, I can look and see, and I'm not emotionally invested in the way that the emotions have to come up and through and muddle up the space. Um, I know that there are ways that we can shift using our clairsentient abilities. I think it's very important. So I don't want to diminish that, because we can actually evoke those feelings within our body that we want to experience and use that to create shift in the body as
Right.
well. That can be a
Yeah.
very powerful tool. And, I do guide people with that. So it's really important that we're bridging and bringing all those together. But when we have somebody holding that space, whether it's through the clairaudient senses or through the clairsentient senses or through the clairvoyant, mine is primarily clairvoyant. I do engage, though, if you are clairaudient, if you are clairsentient more, I do guide you to use those clair senses, right?
Right.
In the way
Right.
that you want to use them. But the capacity to hold the vision and be able to see, we can take a pragmatic approach to, okay, here are the inputs that we need, and here's the out to get the output that we want, which is illuminating that sacred light grid, right? That's going to have a different impact in the body. Sometimes we have to dissolve out the old habits and let that come in. So that can sometimes take time for the body to catch up, if you will. And that's okay. We cultivate the habits that help speed that up, right? We can create the habits that help facilitate that. But once we release that deeper, more entrenched energy, then it makes it easier for us to follow through on the habits that are going to serve us. We release the sabotage, we release the constrictions, we release the confusion and the scatteredness and the indecision that comes. We talked about that early on, when that light comes in and gets scattered in the mind. So it really is a beautiful opportunity to go deeper within and to speed up. I just want to clarify, we don't always get the results we expect, because the results that we need can actually take us much further
Right.
than what we think we want. So even within the body, it might look like, oh man, what is going on? Right? But as we reorganize, we are setting a strong foundation for light. We've got to bring out the old habits and toxins and energies and postures that we held. And so it's like going in and doing that spring cleaning in the house, and we're pulling everything out and going, oh, I don't want this, don't want this, don't want that. It makes a mess. And then we clean it out, but we can gift away the things that we're not using, that maybe somebody else wants, or we repurpose it. We can repurpose that. We can transmute that energy and repurpose it and use it for what's wanting to create through us next.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, let's do that. So let's do that. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Well, that's what you're here for, right? Also, I mean, to bring us the understanding, the what's going on here, and what's behind all what's going on, but also to support us concretely making this happen, right? Building this strong foundation for the light. So you've created a wonderful offering, Body Tissue Transcendence. So we'd love to hear all about it. So for everyone to follow, you can go to gracefulconnections.com/Amanda3, or just scroll down the page to discover Amanda's special offer. So please, Amanda, reveal what you have created for our audience.
So the supracellular consciousness, I want to go right there, because that's what we want. That's what we want to awaken. That's what we want to experience. And why? We want to awaken that in the body, because that's what enables us to live in transcendent states of being, right? Those states of being that we've heard about, maybe we've hoped for, maybe we've had glimpses of them, right? But the consistency and the sustainability isn't there as much. Right. So when we awaken that supracellular consciousness, when we bring those light grids online internally that allow us to have that ever flowing light energy and that supracellular consciousness flowing in and through, that holds us in that internal state of certainty that I was talking about, that is strong, that is founded in the light, that enables us to awaken and live in those transcendent states of being. Those are those states of being where people are offering to do things for you and you didn't even ask. I've had that happen. It's awesome, right? Especially in relation to my girls. I have people offer to do things for them all the time. It's wonderful. I love it. It's like your needs get met before you realize it's a need. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And we all have that capacity to wire that in within, right? We all have areas of growth, and we all have areas that are working out, to a certain degree. So, and then we also have that next level always, that we can open more and be even more in that internal level of certainty and capacity to, again, stand strong in the truth and handle whatever is going on around us. So the way that we open and awaken the supracellular consciousness in our bodies, we're going to do some groundwork, and I'm going to talk to you about the groundwork, but I really want to take us first to how we're going to open up the supreme states of transcendence within you, right? So this opportunity with the live group energy lab that we have, that's where you're going to get the personalized attention. That's where I'm going to work with you one-on-one. It is going to be in a small group setting, but I keep the group small so that we can get you, your focused attention. We can get you the readings that are going to identify the trauma tracks that we need to shift for you. And there are really 3 keys that we're looking at in this live group energy lab that are going to allow that supracellular consciousness to come online. And one of the things that we have to look at is when we experience a trauma ordeal or a trauma event or a trauma occurrence. What happens is that when those trauma tracks are embedded, when those trauma points get dropped in as those anchors that hold us in that density and hold us still locked into the memory of that trauma, that creates it can be a micro disassociation in that space with the body, but in that space where those trauma tracks, where those trauma points occur, we have a disassociation experience with the body. We are not connected fully in with the body. Our energy leaves that space. It's trying to avoid the emotion. It's trying to avoid the intensity of what occurred there. So that's the first thing we have to look at. Where is your primary dissociation with the body? Where is your energy not fully connecting in your body? What's preventing that? And we want to shift that. So we're going to identify that. We're going to shift that. And we are going to restore that sacred soul connection in the space where that primary disassociation is occurring, because that right there is already going to infuse you with so much more energy, right? And it's going to, when you shift that primary dissociation, it's going to give you an experience of like, oh, wait, I can bring that energy in, and it not only does it not hurt, but it actually feels really good. So now that's the invitation. Your body now starts to go, wait a minute, maybe I need to rethink this, right? Maybe I need to allow that energy in. So that in and of itself is a super powerful shift that we're going to be doing in that energy lab that allows that light, that allows that supracellular consciousness to start to awaken within and allow you to have more energy in your body, right? And more energy isn't necessarily, yes, now I'm going to go out and run a marathon, and more energy might just be that, oh, I can relax and settle into my body and feel open and feel spacious, right? So whatever that experience that your body is wanting to create for you and that you're wanting to awaken in your body, that energy is important, right? The next piece that we're going to be doing in that is reconditioning your vagus nerve, right? We want it balanced. We don't want it overactive. We don't want it underactive. We want it balanced, right? We don't want the vagus nerve being triggered by the fear-based patterns that you have going on in the body. And so we're going to identify that number one fear-based pattern that's impacting your vagus nerve, causing, like I said, it can be over or underactive, right? So we want to look at what really is throwing that vagus nerve out of balance, out of harmony, ideal harmony for you. Again, as Sophie mentioned, I can see, what does your harmonious vagus nerve look like and where are you right now? We'll identify what is creating that incongruence, and we'll shift that. And we will recreate your vagus nerve as that powerful. That's one of the most powerful avenues of light, where we can bring that light energy in, and that informs the body, right? That guides the body in really being of service to our soul mission. Okay, so the vagus nerve is very important for that, very important pathway for between brain and body. So we want to make sure that we're reconditioning that. So, if we've dissolved our primary dissociation, and I'm going to talk about how we're going to be doing some trauma tracks releasing before we get to this. As we've released all that, we have to shift the consciousness that is held in that vagus nerve. Right? We've got to shift that consciousness going forward. We don't want to be having that still responding from the old consciousness. So we want to give that specialized attention. So that's the second piece of what we're going to be doing. So you're starting to bring that full pathway into light, right? Then, of course, we're going to upgrade the muscle of your soul, right? We're going to disintegrate that number one constriction that's immobilizing the iliopsoas. Okay. So we're going to look in and we're going to identify, I'm going to talk to you in a minute about the different types of trauma tracks that get held in the body, but we're going to identify what is creating constriction and tightening, what it really isn't allowing, what constriction is not allowing, that iliopsoas, that whole muscular seat that can bring that energy deep down into your foundation, what's not allowing that to occur, right? And we will disintegrate disintegrate. We are going to, right? That's been integrated in. We are going to remove that, and we are going to open you up to the flexion, to the mobility, to the movement of the iliopsoas in the way that you are meant to do it. Again, these are all the things that I'm going to be personally looking into for you. So this is the work that we're going to be doing, where I'm looking at, what does your ideal look like? Where are you now? What do we need to shift to bring that as a match? So for those three areas, okay? As part of that energy lab, we're doing those individual shifts, but we're also going to be doing some work as a group. It's so powerful when we come together in these small groups in this way, because everyone always gets on and they're like, oh my gosh, like I resonated with everybody here, and I had this shift and this shift, right? We come together, we have all these micro shifts that add up to a really deep opening and awakening in the body. And then we also do some group processes. So we're going to do some supracellular consciousness upgrades and restoration, right? After we've done the readings and we've done the shifts, we want to bring that consciousness of the whole body being into those elevated states of light. So again, setting that foundation of certainty within to live in those transcendent states of being in the body, right? That's the big disconnect that most have, is that we can experience the light, we can have experiences of it, we can bring it into the body to a degree, but our bodies aren't living in those transcendent states because we still have these different nuances that aren't allowing for that. So we want to reset the body to be attuned to and to be available to the micro attunements that are going to allow that supracellular consciousness to be the foundation for the transcendent state of living, breathing, and moving. So we're going to do the upgrades. We're going to do the restoration in the different areas, the vagus nerve, the fascia, really, that the impact that has for your hormones. We've got so many different hormones running our body, communicating through our body. So really, bringing that restoration to that ideal communication for the chemical messengers of the body, as well as part of that upgrade. And really, activating a whole body reset, attuning to those supracellular consciousness frequencies in such a way that whole body template comes online. That really is the match for you having access, the openings to that light coming in, because again, this isn't a static fixed state. This is a template of light that's organic and can adapt and evolve as you adapt and evolve and bring more of your soul awareness in. So as you grow, as you awaken, as you ascend, as you expand, your body is naturally, organically adapting in the moment. That's what we are creating the foundation for here, right? You don't have to go in and go, oh, man, I'm in another state of expansion. Let me get my list out, write down all the things I need to shift, right? We want the body to adjust as much as possible in the moment as the light energies come in. Because again, that creates that setup of the consistency. Light energies come in, my body adapts. Light energies come in. So we're not getting a buildup of light. And then you're like, okay, I got to go take a nap for 3 days because I just got all these major upgrades and my body needs to recalibrate, right? This is really about setting the body up to consistently adapt in the moment so that as each iteration comes in, we are expanding, evolving, and growing all systems online together organically. So that's the live group energy lab. So any questions about that piece, Sophie, before I move on?
No, I just want to mention for anyone who is not yet familiar with the Energy Lab, which is really a wonderful combination. It is a wonderful combination of group work. It is a group setting in which there is group work and there is individual work and individual attention. And as you said, Amanda, intuitive readings and shifts. So it's a combination of both, and which is what makes it so powerful and so enjoyable. It's an intimate settings, but at the same time there's the benefit of the individual work and the benefits of each other's work and of the group, the power of the group also, and the compassion of the group. So just I wanted to clarify for anyone who hasn't yet experienced this. This is such a wonderful formula, like as a format of work. It is really perfect. So I just wanted to add this.
Thank you for that. And I love that because as we come together, we amplify the intention energy. So, we're all holding each other in that higher intention of awakening that consciousness within. And it's so powerful. I'm always moved, so moved by what comes through in these settings with the energy labs and the work that we're doing there. And you're absolutely right, Sophie. You get that personalized, the 3 things that I mentioned. I work one-on-one with you on those, and we actually make the shift. So you get the reading and we make the shift right there in the moment so that you don't have to go back and do anything. Like we're done with that particular piece in that space, right? Now, what's important is that we do want to do some groundwork before we get to that space, right? We don't want to be bringing all that light in and having it bumping up against these trauma tracks and then hoping that it dissolves those trauma tracks. Now, it can do that, but it's much easier if we do some work, some priming work with the body to really get it ready to receive these elevated light frequencies, right? So that's what we're doing in the body tissue trauma release workshop. Right. As we go into the workshop, I talked about some of the areas of the body where we want to give attention and focus. So we're definitely going to be going into the iliopsoas. We're going to go into the brain memory centers. I talked about those, the hippocampus, the amygdala. We're going to be going into the sensory organs. Right. So what are our senses perceiving? What are the filters that we have on our sensory organs that are actually based in the trauma ordeals that we've experienced or that are attached to the trauma tracks? Because I've actually seen filters in our sensory organs that track and are attached to trauma tracks. And so if there's something that we're afraid to do, we're not going to hear clearly what are the next step forward to do that thing. Right. If we're like fear, oh, if I do this, it's going to be real bad. It's not going to be good. Then we won't hear the steps that we need to take forward that are actually going to take us into an experience that we perceive might be similar. It might not even be a similar experience, but from our visual perspective, our visual senses might be going, oh, nope, I know how this is going to go. I'm going to close off any hearing, any feeling, anything associated with that. So I've seen these filters in the sensory organs actually attached to the trauma tracks. So we're going to be going into the sensory organs and really getting clear on what are those attachments? What are those fears? What are those worries, concerns, anxieties that aren't allowing me to actually sense truth? right? We all delete, distort, generalize. We all filter information. We have to, right? Our bodies can't take in every bit of information that's coming in. Our systems would be fried. It's just too much. And so we want to be deliberate about how are we filtering that information? You know, how are we choosing to filter it? What are we connecting to with as a vision for what we want to step into moving forward, and what we want to step into now that's going to carry us forward, I should say, because that's really what it is. We're bringing the vision of what do we want to experience into the body when we release those filters, and allowing that frequency and vibration then to be what we project out into our future lifeline. So we're going to be looking at the sensory organs. We're going to be, something that's so important is that our spleen, our stomach tend to be worry centers of the body, right? We hold a lot of worry in our spleen and our stomach. That's why, oftentimes if you have digestive issues, like, oh, my stomach hurts, we've got to look at, the stomach specifically. What is the worry that's driving that? So often symptoms in the body can be driven by those emotions. I know Sophie is our expert in those emotional impacts on our body, and so we really want to look at what is the consciousness that we're holding in our spleen and stomach as those primary worry centers of the body, and shift that. Again, if we're shifting into avenues of light, we also want to shift into the centers of light as well, right? So we want to shift that. Instead of worry, what do we want to infuse into our future lifeline? Use the spleen, use the stomach as the projection centers that they are to project out what we want to experience. Shift that word in joy, shift it to beauty, to peace, to freedom, whatever it is you want to experience, and let that be the vibration and the energy that we are projecting out. Right? That's actually going to help facilitate and serve for dissolution of trauma tracks as well, because we're dissolving the worry about what might happen. Remember when I initially started, we talked about those trauma points largely being based in not wanting to repeat things that were painful. And I get it. We don't want to repeat things that are painful, but the best way to avoid that is to radiate the energies we want to experience in our body and let that then radiate out. So we'll be working with those centers. Back, shoulders, neck, that really is tied largely into the fascia. So we're going to be working with the fascia, especially in the back, the shoulders, and the neck, where we tend to hold a lot of tension and tightness. And especially nowadays that we're more computer oriented. So many of us work on the computers and we have tension held that way. So we're going to be going deep into those areas. All of this, identifying trauma tracks, energetic scarring, right? When we have a trauma, when we have an injury, when we have something happen, there is a scarring, and that these trauma tracks really resemble and reflect the scarring, right? They reflect that scarring that we experience. And so as we do these deep excavations in the workshop, we really are dissolving that scarring, dissolving that hardened energy, right? I know I had knee surgery when I was in high school, and I have a scar that runs down the front of my knee because there's two tendons that run between your knee, or two ligaments. Two ligaments. And one's the anterior cruciate, which runs in the front, and then the posterior cruciate, which runs in the back. And I had a complete tear of my anterior cruciate ligament. And then you have meniscus ligaments that run along the side of the knee, and I had a partial tear in one of those. And what they did to fix it, because they said, if you want to play sports, you can't have those bones grinding on each other. We've got to put something in the place of that ligament that runs between the knee, that front ligament. So they sliced a small piece of the tendon that runs from the front of the kneecap down into the lower leg and used that to replace the anterior cruciate ligament. When I first got the surgery, that was a gnarly scar, right? Big, wide, thick. You can't even see it now, hardly. Like if I point it out, people go, "Oh, I didn't even realize you had a scar there." Like that's the level of shift that's occurred over time. High school was quite some time ago, but at the same time, I've also done a ton of work. Not deliberately, because I never really cared that I had the scar there. I was like, battle scar, right? I don't know. But it never bothered me that I actually had the scar there. Like from a visual perspective, it never at all. But with the shifting of the consciousness that I've done for my body in general, it's that scar, you can't hardly tell it's even there unless I point it out, usually. Now everyone who sees me, you're going to know.
We want to look, but it's good because it's kind of a benchmark, right? It gives you a benchmark of how because the scar is, and for you and for everyone, a scar is a very visible expression, but it's kind of a reflection of what's not visible, right? And it gives us a benchmark of, oh, it's fading away. If the visible part is fading away, is it actually, it's a question to you, Amanda, the visible part fading away, does it reveal that the invisible part is fading away, being resolved, dissolved as well? I suppose it is.
Absolutely. I mean, I see our body as our bodies are reflections of the internal consciousness that we have going on, whatever that might be. And also
Right.
our soul journey. You know, there are things that we as a soul wanted to come into experience. And so sometimes we get caught up in, oh, I've got to shift all this consciousness, but sometimes we just have to settle in and go, wait, I came in to experience some certain things. You know, is this part of the experience that I wanted to have? Is there a reason that I'm experiencing this? And let yourself feel the fullness of it and then move on. Um, with the scar on the front of my knee, it's very fascinating because that was such a journey. That didn't happen overnight. It took quite a long while. Like I had weird sensations in the nerves and everything. Like kneeling on my knee felt really weird for a long time, you know, after I had that surgery. And I'm going to tell you, it was a lot of work. You don't realize how much you use your knee until you can't use it to move, to flex, to stand, like so much, right? But it was definitely a journey. So, you know, the takeaway from that is that these deep scars that we have, if we're not seeing results right away, we don't want to fear and fret. I wasn't like, oh man, you know, I've got this scar on my knee, you know, and like, it's just, you know, it was there. You know, and even the sensation in the knee, it's like, I worked with it. I just did one step at a time. What's the next thing that I need to do? What's the next thing that I need to do? Right. I was trained at a very young age in this process without realizing that I was being trained in this process. And
Right.
so as the scars shift, as they fade, as they start to release, that really is an indication that we have transcended the consciousness that created it in the first place.
Right.
Right. So again, we're bringing that back into the transcendent energy. And so that really, like you said, it's a really good visual benchmark, but also we can have that benchmark, you know, especially in working with the energy labs, but in, you know, when we're looking in and peering in energetically, we can have those same benchmarks. When we can feel the difference in our body, we really want to become masters at identifying the subtle energies of the body, the subtle sensations, the subtle feeling tones in the body. Those are benchmarks. And so often they're overlooked. I'll have somebody be like, I've been doing all this work and nothing's changed. And it's like, really nothing? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, when you first came to me, you said you were hunched over, you couldn't stand up straight and you could barely move. And now you're walking like a mile a day. I mean, that's a pretty significant growth, right? Like that's often because it's a gradual
Right.
opening. Right. So we don't realize the degree to which we are shifting. So we want to become masters. This is where our body helps us. We want to become masters at recognizing the subtle energies because we don't always have that visual scar that's going to demonstrate that we have shifted consciousness. But we can start to identify it for ourselves when we recognize those subtle energies. That's a big part of why we're going into the sensory organs and dissolving those filters that are attached to the trauma tracks. Because when we can really open our sensory organs to be attuned to the subtle energies of the body, the subtle whispers that we hear, the subtle glimpses of visuals that we see. What my clairvoyance looks like is not what I ever would have imagined it looks like, right? The way I see things is not what I would have guessed when I first heard the words, oh, you're clairvoyant. What? Oh, but you know, I don't see these clear pictures, or you know, it doesn't show up the way that I thought it would initially. It's magical. It's better than I could have imagined. But it took some learning how to interpret what I was seeing. Right. So this is all part of the journey. So, you know, this may feel like it's off track a little bit for the trauma tracks that we're talking about, but it really isn't, because the trauma tracks are what distort our capacity to be in tune with these subtle nuances of the body that we can perceive. So I
Right.
just want to make sure we're making that connection and you realize
Yeah.
how important that is.
Uh,
You do, Sophie.
yeah, and I want to bounce on this because what I'm hearing in what you say or behind what you're saying, and you'll confirm if that's correct, is that by doing this work, we actually train ourselves to be able to detect trauma tracks. And oh, I mean, once we've done with you the work on the major ones, right, and the more incapacitating ones, then and with the workshop we become able to detect we are more subtle in our perception of what's going on in our body, that we can become able of detecting trauma tracks and taking care of them, right? Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And the beautiful part is that each time, like, I mean, it's going to be recorded. So each time you go through, you're going to be guided through the journey. You're going to pick up something different, and you're going to go more
Right.
into, even deeper into the awakening of those subtle energies. So no matter where you are in your journey, if you're like, I don't perceive anything, right? You
Yeah.
go in, just let yourself be guided through the exercises and allow yourself to notice what you notice, and be okay with not noticing what you think you like, not having the expectations of what you have to notice. Just let yourself
Hmm.
be open to making the internal shifts in whatever way that you need to the first time through, and then go the second time through, and then go the third time through, or however many times you feel called to do so. And you might find that you want to do it a couple times and then you don't do it for a while, and then you go back 6 months later and you're like, oh my gosh, this just is something else, you know? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
it's beautiful the way
Mhm.
that this has come through to deliver, so that you can have an ongoing tool of support that is going, it's all about awakening the avenues of light within. So it doesn't
Mm.
matter where you are in your journey, you're
Mm.
always going to be able to awaken new avenues of light, right? It's like going and traveling. Instead of traveling out in the world, you're traveling to new spaces in your body and new light spaces in the cosmos through your body. So it's really fun and exciting. And that takes me to the vagus nerve, is the last body part I
Mhm.
want to highlight, because that is one of those avenues that can really distribute that light through our body via the nervous system, and keep that connection, keep, the brain and the body in communication, and in those kind of titrating shifts that are necessary to be in coherence, to be working together for a common goal, right? We're having the collaboration of the whole body working together for the common intention, instead of having different parts of our body thinking, I need to do this and I need to do that, right? We're
Mhm.
recognizing the role that each part of the body is recognizing the role that the other parts of the body play. And there's more of a harmonious balance of, oh, I don't have to overwork, because this part of the body has that going. I don't have to be so engaged, right? It's just like when we're in a team setting and we're working together, when we realize that this is the part I'm responsible for, and somebody else is going to do this other part, we realize we don't have to take on the whole project. There's such relief. So our body can settle into that relief state and not have to feel like it has to be so hyper vigilant. So it's so important that we bring that connectivity and communication, and really open up that communication channel as those avenues of light, as those sacred grids all throughout the body, right? And we can bring those spiraling light energies into different spaces of the body in a fun, playful way, right? We can just be like, okay, what light wants to come in and where does it want to go? And we can observe. So,
Mhm.
with that, one of the things, of course, that we want to do is we want to uproot and eliminate the 5 specific types of trauma that are camouflaged in the body, right? I see these camouflage body trauma traps. And so, I've really seen commonly 5 different types, or, 5 ways in which these trauma tracks tend to be stored. So there's the compacted trauma. That's where it's really concentrated in one space. And it can be a small track, or it can even be like a ball of trauma, but it's really compacted in a space. And I want you to think about this like a compacted bowel. What happens when we have a compacted bowel? We've got constipation, right? Things aren't moving, things aren't releasing out. So the compacted trauma track creates a constant energetic constipation in the body. There's no energy movement there. energy is not moving, you can't get the vital resources to that space of the body. So that's an important type of trauma that we want to dissolve and cleanse and release. So we're going to be working with the compacted trauma, deeply entrenched trauma trails. These are the tracks that I was talking about that are really embedded in the body. Those are the ones that are deep in the muscle, running deep in the fascia, that are shifting our posture, that are holding us in positions that really aren't our ideal, that are impacting our capacity to breathe deeply in the body, right? All the trails that really run through the body and even create distortions in the connections. So, if we have a distortion in the tailbone, like if our tailbone is out of position, even by like a tiny degree, it can create a distortion in the neck up to like 4 centimeters. So that's a huge shift, right? That's a huge shift all the way up to the neck when you have just a teeniest little micro misalignment in the tailbone. So that similarly, that's what these trauma tracks and trauma trails do, is that they create those distortions that at one point, maybe it wouldn't be such a big distortion, but as you trace it out, it becomes bigger and wider. So we're going to look at the deeply entrenched trauma trail that needs to be cleared for you. That's going to unlock that trauma that's not allowing the light to move through the channel of your body. We're going to look at that main one, the one that's having the greatest impact, that's creating the most efficient energy flow, wherever that is for you in the body on that one. Binding trauma snarls. So these are tracks that wrap around. So a lot of times I see energies that look like vines or binds or wires wrapping around the spine, wrapping around an organ or gland, wrapping around the ankles, the wrist oftentimes, those are where I see a lot of the binding snarls. So we're going to find, again, for each of these, we're looking at the most prominent one, the one that's having the greatest impact, that's depleting energy most. Again, it's something you can come back to and do over again if you feel like there's more than one you want to dissolve, or you may find that in the workshop, you're actually able to dissolve multiple at once, just depending, right? Just depending on where you are in your journey and what your level of attachment or unattachment is to those snarls that are in there. So for some of you, you're going to be like, well, I've done lots of work. So it might just be that the shells of the structures are still in place, and it's just a matter of realizing that they're there and they can release easily. So that is a possibility, right? For others of you, we're going to have to go in and really look at what is the consciousness that's holding those bindings in place, or holding the trauma trails, or holding that compacted trauma in place. So, and there's no right or wrong, this is really about what you need. It's all about what do you need? That's what's going to shift, right? Trauma trigger points. So those are those deep impenetrable points, like the plugs that we were talking about, the anchors that really don't allow you, they're immovable, right? They're in there, they're stuck, they're immovable. And they're not allowing for the light to dissolve them. They're not allowing for the light to get through. It's really got that trauma anchored in. We're gonna do some dissolving of that, and then sticky pervasive trauma. So this is a lot of what I see in the fascia, is that sticky kind of glue-like energy. There's a sense of, we talked about feeling like you have to hold it all together. You have to maintain control. That creates that sense of certainty that we were talking about, that we want to have in our body. That sticky, pervasive trauma is like the glue in different spaces. It can be in the fascia, but I have also seen that in different organs and glands, specifically in the mind a lot of times too, like glue holding these conditions of the mind in place, because it's like, oh my gosh, I have to have this condition of the mind. If I don't, it's going to be trouble for me, or I'm not going to have the outcomes or the results that I want. So those are the 5 main types of trauma tracks that I usually work with people in private session to shift. And a lot of times they do come, a couple of them can come together. Obviously the one I talked about that I gave the example of had the trauma trigger points, and the entrenched trauma trails, but then also there was that sticky pervasive trauma in the mind, right? So it had 3 of them. So a lot of times these work together. That's why we're going to do all 5, so that we're really having a deep, thorough cleansing and clearing in that workshop, right? And then from there, once we shift the trauma trails and we do some work going into the specific areas of the body, we want to do a whole myofascial reinnervation. Right. So this is really about restoring that divine light flow through the fascia, that glue that holds the body together, and that really determines the positioning of the organs and glands, the positioning of the muscles, the positioning of your spine and your body, and that capacity to really be open to the light that wants to come in. So we're going to do that myofascial reinnervation that really is about allowing your whole body being to bring that divine flow, divine light flow template online for you. Okay. So that's the precursor to awakening the supracellular consciousness. So we're walking through all these steps in the workshop to really open up that divine light template to bring you into that greater space of, relief, light, but also being able to recognize the potential in the body. When we bring the divine light flow template online and we have that trauma dissolved out, now we've got space to go, oh, wait, there's another possibility here. There's something else that can awaken in my body here. And you can start to get a sense and a feeling, more of a feeling tone for the really magical light energies that want to move in and through your body. And the beauty of that is that, you know, we talked about the dissociation from the body when we've got these trauma tracks and trauma points in place. When we start to experience what it feels like to have that divine light flow in again, it invites our energy into our body. It allows us to stay connected and stay grounded in our body. The biggest number one issue that generates issues and symptoms in the body is not having energy in the body, our energy shooting out, not wanting to be connected in with the body. That's the, you know, when I do sessions with people, when I do programs, everything is to bring the energy back into the body and to let the light awaken in the body. That's what the whole goal is, right? To be these walking light bodies that are just beautiful and brilliant and joyful and really at ease with experiencing the full range of emotions. I mean, we're going to have, with the light moving through our body, we're still going to have all the full range of emotions. They're still going to come through, but we can be blissfully angry in a moment and then it's gone. You know, like we can be blissfully frustrated. Like, oh my gosh, like get out of my way, you know, and then gone, right? So we can be in the experience of the emotions without judging them, without feeling like we have to try to shut them down, without feeling like there's something wrong with experiencing them, right? Part of what we came here to experience is the fullness of everything in our bodies. And so, you know, as we bring these light energies online, as we bring that divine light flow template, as we allow the supracellular consciousness to awaken, it sets the foundation to really allow us to be in the experience of all the joy, all the full range of everything, and be at peace in doing that. And, you know, really recognizing that a heightened emotional moment is not the state of being of who we are, and it doesn't define us. It's an experience of a moment, and it's just, that's what it is, right? And we can be that detached about it.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Phew. That's just mind-blowing. And you know, when you mentioned the myofascial reinnervation, I had a vision of glowing in the dark, like suddenly phew, the light is turned on, and I can perceive how this is this is not only the promise, this is the whole point of this program and of this package, and this is what's going to come through, because we're made to carry this light, and it's kind of a reclaiming, right, where you are bringing back to us our foundations, allowing us to reclaim the light that we are meant to carry and to shine and to emanate. So glowing in the dark. Yeah.
100%. I love that. Well, I love the glowing in the dark, and that's on. This isn't about bringing in something that we think is the experience that we should be having. It's not about, you know, bringing light in, or like I gave the example of the flowers that cover up the trail. It's not about covering up the darkness. And bring the light in to give us some kind of sense of, this is how I'm supposed to be. So I'm going to bring the light in because this is what I think I need to be. This is about letting you come home to self, letting you come home to the majesty of you and the brilliance and the beauty of you that you know is there. We try to pretend and tell ourselves we aren't these beautiful, majestic, wonderful, amazing, incredible beings. And you know that it's a pretense. and it feels so real. I don't want to diminish, you know, it's heavy, it's dense, it's hard. And sometimes it can feel difficult to recognize that true majesty that exists within us. But that's why we do this work, so that we can drop the pretenses and go, you know what? Yeah, I'm pretty, like, I am a divine spark in my unique expression, and I'm uniquely expressing that divinity out into the world, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful, and I'm exploring it internally and I love it, right? And that really is the facilitator to allow you not to be so concerned with how others are receiving you or what others might think. It allows you to come into the excitement of, ooh, what's awakening within me and what's opening within me, and how is that wanting to come out through me? And it becomes such a much more joyful process. I know I used to be very quiet as a kid, even through college, really, you know, somewhat reserved, quiet, not really speaking out or expressing out. I'm really just observing everything around me. And I think there's a wisdom to that, because it's really, you know, I was understanding and recognizing, how does the world work? How are people operating in the world? What's going on? You know, what are people's tendencies? But at the same time, I was also in that space of not recognizing the beauty and the magnificence that existed within me. I wasn't in a space of honoring to the fullness.
Right.
And so I was very cautious of, like, ooh, what are people going to think if I say this? There, you know, there was that reservation there. I don't feel that at all. You know, at this stage, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to be what I'm going to be. I'm going to express what I'm going to express. And if it comes off a little flat, or if it comes off, you know, some kind of way, then we'll adjust in the moment, or address it
Handle
in
it.
the moment, right? But it's, you know, there's a freedom in that. And sometimes I go out and I'm very vocal, and other times I go out and I'm still in my observing state, right? I'm not in center of attention. I'm not jumping in the middle of everything and feeling like I have to say something. And so it's just beautiful. I can just be with what intuitively wants to move through me. And that's the beauty of opening to these elevated states of consciousness and living more and more in that transcendent state that actually is a natural state. It's just that we've forgotten, or maybe we've never known how to fully embrace that in this incarnation. And that's what we're moving into as we do this deeper work. And so I did want to mention, there is a guided journey as well with this. It's injury consciousness dissolution. It's really about dissolving the scar tissue. And we talked about the scar tissue, the energetic scarring that comes with a shock experience, a trauma experience, an injury. There is energetic scarring that occurs. So we're going to go into, you can pick a specific injury, and it doesn't have to be a physical injury, right? It can be, mom yelled at me and I was terrified, you know, like you might have an experience that you remember where it's like, oh my goodness, or, you know, somebody embarrassed me at school and I was mortified, right? It might be something like that. You might have multiple injuries that come to mind. You might have, like, I broke my fingernail and for a moment it stung, you know, and you might want to go back to that memory, you know, whatever it is. It doesn't matter if it's big or small, you'll have that guided journey that you can focus on a specific injury. You know, but again, this is another opportunity where, you know, the main goal of it really is to bring you into greater awareness of what's going on underneath the surface, what's going on with your body, to really get you starting to recognize the consciousness that's being held in the body, especially in relation to these experiences that you're having. And as you bring that awareness, it helps to diffuse the emotions that are so intense, right? It brings that intensity down so you can really recognize from more of an observational standpoint, oh, yeah, I took that pain in and now I realize I'm a little bit more cautious with that finger where I busted that nail that one time, right? Like we compensate, we exercise a little more care. So, you know, that's a really powerful primer to help set the stage and get you ready for the deeper work that we're going to be doing through the whole program. So that is also available as part of the offer.
Wonderful, very complete, very comprehensive. So let me wrap it up. You have option one, that's the full package, including the energy lab, the supracellular consciousness awakening, live group energy lab. You have the body tissue trauma release live workshop and the replay, of course, to keep working with it. And you have the bonus injury consciousness dissolution guided journey to also keep working. That's a tool for life as well. So that's option one, the complete package. And you have option two, the workshop that includes the live workshop, body tissue trauma release, and the injury consciousness dissolution guided journey. And it's a Graceful Connections exclusive. Thank you so much for offering us the exclusivity of this brand new offering, Amanda. And it is very generously priced. It comes with a 2 and even 3 payment plan to make it accessible to everyone who needs it. I love that it's really transcendence. It's about the transcendence. So it's very radical. I'm all for radical work. And I love the shifting trauma, the trauma tracks into avenues of light, right? And this coming to this glowing in the dark, that it's really so inspiring. I find it so inspiring. So thank you so much for this, Amanda. I would like to ask you, who needs this program?
Anyone who has a body. I mean, we all have experienced.
I was thinking, who doesn't? Yeah.
I know that's vague, but honestly, we've all experienced some
Yeah.
level of trauma. We all have some level of closure and constriction in the fascia, in the psoas, in the vagus nerve, in the worry centers. That when we shift, it's going to open us. It's only going to open us to more of ourselves, right? So often, I tend to have clients that come to me who are healers themselves, right? I have a lot of healers that come to me because they're doing such beautiful work, but their bodies are breaking down because in the work that they're doing, they've healed a lot of their trauma, but they still have these deeper grooves that they don't even realize that are there. Because we all have our blind spots, right? And, in the work that's being done of service, oftentimes what I have found is that when the body starts breaking down, it's also an indication that there is a new level of expansion for that person. The work that they're doing, it is ready to expand and to grow.
Right.
And so we can get ahead of having to break down. We don't have to have our bodies break down. We can get ahead of that and deliberately create the expansion in the body so that now our body is just naturally and organically responding so that when we get ready to evolve and expand and grow into the next evolution of what's going on, even if we start to bump up against some restriction, we go, wait, we're driven to, I've got a tool for that.
Right.
I've got a resource for that. I can shift that restriction that I'm feeling in there. It's not allowing me to move into that next level really easily. So I think this is really important to recognize when our body's breaking down. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong and I've got to go into panic mode and fix the problem of the body breaking down. We want to really recognize what is the deeper reason behind that. Is an expansion that's wanting to happen? Is it that I didn't listen to my body and implement the care that I needed when I needed it, and I didn't set a healthy boundary and I said yes when I should have said no, right? There's different reasons why our body breaks down. Those are just a couple of examples, but when we are in this space of having these avenues of light illuminated and we have access to the supracellular consciousness that guides us to what we need with whatever is coming up for us, whether it's an expansion, whether it's something in our environment that we need to address and adjust. When we start to shift and open our bodies, our whole environment shifts. The people that we connect with can start to shift. That can feel unsettling and our body can start to constrict and go, wait, no, I don't want to lose that. And the perception can be that we're going to lose that relationship, but maybe that relationship is just going to shift and transform and become more beautiful. We don't know. But, really, if you are truly dedicated to opening up and allowing your path to be easy and allowing your body to be a partner in your journey of expansion, then you're going to want to do this.
Yes. Yes, I hear you. I love how it really it's really open to the full range of situations and of persons, right? Wherever we are on our journey, um, this program and you through and with this program meet us where we are and take us to the next step. And then with the program, we can keep working and growing, not just working, but growing, right? And growing in this organic way. And I love that. So yes, who needs this? Everyone who has a body. So I love this.
Well,
Absolutely.
and truly, if you're ready, if you're like, yes, transcendence, I want to be operating from that transcendent space of living. I want to be in the flow. I want to be, as things are coming at me as opportunities, I want to be able to discern and make quick decisions and choose directed actions. That, I mean, oh my gosh, there's no greater gift.
For
Um,
sure. Yeah.
Somebody who used
And
to
I
be
would
sleeping
say
in diffusion.
anyone who wants to own their light, right? If I want to own my light and share it and emanate it, that's what I need. Because
So it's here for you. You're welcome. I invite you. I look forward to working with you. I look forward to, exploring and seeing what wants to open up for you. For me, it's such a joy to witness the blossoming of the light within and to really see that taking root and holding you in a whole new way. So I can't wait. I'm excited to really go deep into this and, open up those transcendent states of light within you that really are founded on that supracellular consciousness awakening. So, Sophie, thank you for letting me bring this forward and to be able to be a witness to that, and for all for holding all of us and bringing us together in this sacred way to really honor the body. This is the ultimate sublime way of honoring the body for all that it does by bringing the light through, by releasing that which we don't need to hold anymore. So thank you for creating the opportunity for us to come together and have this conversation and really be able to open to that greater intention that we've all called forward collectively.
absolutely. Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for meeting us in the Orb of Grace and answering the call and bringing this, making this transcendence available to everyone. Graceful Connections is exclusive. Again, go to gracefulconnections.com/Amanda3 to get all the details and join. And you have 2 payments, 3 payments, really making it accessible to everyone. And we'll meet again on Friday, March 15th at 9 a.m. Pacific for live intuitive readings galore. So we're gonna get very personal there, and we love the readings. Amanda will read for you what's the #1 trauma trail in my body suffocating myself. So we're gonna get very specific with this, and very much looking forward to this. Of course, if you can't attend the live call, make sure to request your reading in advance and then catch up with the replay to receive Amanda's insights and wisdom. And now let's take a moment. Let's take a moment to be present once again to the Orb of Grace. Breathing in the Orb of Grace, holding us, holding all that we have discovered today, all that we have experienced, all that we have gained awareness of, all that we are not even yet aware that we have received, allowing it to sink in, to come to our awareness in its own time as we are safely held in this sacred space of the Orb of Grace. For as long as it serves our highest good, our evolution, and the highest good of all. And I'm closing now by giving gratitude to each and every one of you in the audience. Thank you for answering yes to the calling of grace and the calling of your body to convert those trails of trauma into avenues of light, of divine light. Yes, avenues of divine light in your body right there. Gratitude to you, immense gratitude to you, Amanda. Amazing with all the wisdom, the brilliance, the offerings you have gifted us today through all the graceful connections that have been woven with you and your masterful expertise. Thank you for being there, for all that you have shared and all that you're offering, Amanda.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you again. Oh, I always love venturing into the body. So thank you, thank you, thank
Thank
you.
you. And gratitude, our gratitude to Christel and the Academy for the Soul for offering this platform in which graceful connections grow and expand, impacting our lives, our environment, and the world at large as we step into living our divine radiance. Gratitude to the Orb of Grace for providing a safe, sacred space for this journey of exploration, and gratitude for all the grace that we are blessed with at every moment, whether we're aware of it or not. It offers all the nourishment, the nurturing, the healing, the revelations, and the realizations that we open our hearts to receive. Gratitude to our higher selves, gratitude to our bodies and the light of our bodies that wants to shine, and to all the higher beings who guide, support, and protect us. And gratitude to the divine. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Until we meet again, many graceful blessings to you all. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye now.
Bye.